Some of today's stories absolutely contain subject matter that some people may be sensitive to, and viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you'd like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And as always, thank you. I was 22 and living on my own for the first time when this happened. It was the mid-90s. I had just gotten off work around 11 p.m. To reach my apartment building, I could either walk on the sidewalk, lit with street lamps, decently trafficked, or cut across this communal garden, pitch black and set back from the street. I saved about 1 whole minute of walking time by cutting through the communal garden, but being young and stupid, a lot of the times I took the shortcut. That night, I got that weird feeling to not take the shortcut. I kept to the sidewalk, but there was no one else around. When I got past the garden, all of a sudden this large man pops up from its exit path. There is no way he could have been in front of me or just behind me as I was walking. I would have noticed him. The only logical explanation was that he'd been hiding in the pitch-black garden. A drunk who'd been sleeping it off, maybe? No. My body was screaming at me to get the hell out of there. I began walking faster. My dad had taught me to always carry my keys in my fist, with a key pointed out in case I needed to punch someone, so I had that. But I'm 5'4", and probably weighed 110 pounds. This guy was tall and big. My only chance was to outpace him. I'm speedwalking at this point, and I feel him matching my pace, getting closer. He's breathing heavily, and I feel this angry energy coming off of him. But my apartment building is right there. So, I put on a burst of speed. When I reached the entrance, 2 people are leaving and hold the door open for me and him. I don't know why I didn't tell them that I thought this guy was following me. My mind froze, and I was just trying to get inside my apartment. Plus, I was still trying to rationalize it. Maybe he was visiting someone in the building. Maybe it was all just a coincidence. Don't be paranoid. Besides, it only took a couple of seconds for them to be out the door. I had missed my chance. I'm climbing the stairs as fast as I can. It's a 3-story building, and I live on the 3rd floor. He's climbing the stairs too. It's still right behind me. I get to my floor, which has 4 apartments on the right side, where I live, and 4 on the left. I pass by apartments 1 and 2. He's still right behind me. I stop at apartment 3, where I live, and he stops in front of apartment 4, where I know that he does not live. He hasn't said anything. He's just breathing hard, and I think there's no way that I'm going to open my apartment door and have him push me inside and assault me, or worse. He also hasn't knocked on the door of apartment 4. It's worth noting that the apartments are U-shaped, with mine and my neighbor's door being very close together. So, I bang on my own apartment door as loud as I can, but I yell my neighbor's name. "Hey, Kevin, let me in." This startles the guy. Even more so when my own apartment door doesn't open, but Kevin's does. Kevin sees the guy standing right in front of his door and asks what he wants. The guy starts mumbling something about having the wrong apartment, but I have my own door open so fast that I'm inside my place in a flash, locking the door behind me. I grab my cordless phone to call the police, but I hear Kevin through the door telling this guy he needs to leave. The guy does. Kevin knocks on my door and asks if I'm okay. I thank him and say that I am, but inside I am still frozen, adrenaline pumping, scared. I thank him again and tell him to have a good night, and lock my door again. I have my phone in my hand, just ready to call the police. But I start trying to rationalize it again. What exactly happened? A guy followed me home, but then said he had the wrong apartment. Are the cops going to care about something minor like that? I try to calm myself down, but I'm also berating myself. Why didn't I run the instant I felt him following me? Why didn't I tell the people we passed when the front door opened that I thought I was being chased? Worse, why didn't I tell Kevin that the second he opened his door and saved me? He could have let me inside his apartment. We could have called the cops together. But because of my stupidity, everything felt so ambiguous and I was questioning myself. A couple of weeks later, I'm visiting my grandparents, and my grandfather was reading the paper. He tells me that a woman was attacked in the apartment building across the street from mine. It's the same guy. He had multiple convictions for sexual assault and had just recently been released on parole. I used to hang out with my cousin a lot. We were both 10 and male at the time of this encounter, and I'm now 33. It has stayed with me ever since. We would mostly spend our youth roaming the streets, not causing trouble, but kicking footballs around fields, climbing, hanging out with kids our age, the typical stuff before iPads and Netflix became commonplace. One day we decided to go and explore a part of the town that we had never explored before. It meant going through alleys and back streets. The trail would actually end approximately 2 to 3 minutes from my house, which was a safe part of the neighborhood. It was a sunny day, albeit not too warm, and my cousin and I had been walking for what seemed like miles. The journey we'd planned was supposed to go on for longer, but we'd gotten bored and decided to take a detour home. The detour involved cutting through an alleyway that looked a little bit like the Coronation Street General, if anyone is familiar with the TV show. To the left of us were terraced houses, and to the right of us were steel fences with sharp points to deter any would-be thieves. We continued up here, and soon enough, one of the kids from our school lived there, and his mom shouted, "What are you boys doing here?" We ran, and I don't know why. We just didn't like her son, and her tone was accusatory. As we ran, we bumped into another kid. "Don't go that way," he said, as his voice trailed off as he ran further and farther away from us, down the opposite end of the alleyway. We shrugged and continued on. It got darker with the trees and the foliage, but we soon emerged from the alley. And that's when we saw the lone boy. A boy aged 10 to 12 just stood there. His eyes were empty. He had a vacant look on his face. Well, the half of his face that we could see well enough. Above his mouth was covered with a veil, somewhat like a Halloween mask of some description. Except it was June. Halloween was still months away. As we got closer, we noticed the boy had a kitchen knife in his hands. I mean a fully real stainless steel kitchen knife. Both hands on the handle. The sunlight made the blade glisten. We cracked a joke like, "Are you cooking outside?" But he looked at us blankly. No emotion, nothing. We were too freaked out to move. And that's when we realized that he hadn't moved either. Not a muscle. We saw him blink, but physically the knife hadn't been raised up or pointed at us, just held closely to his chest, blade pointing upwards. We figured that we should get away because instinct told us that this was weird and a bit freaky. Going back down the alley didn't seem like a safe option. Being stuck in an alleyway with a strange kid with a knife didn't seem smart. In front of us was a road on a steep hill. It was our best bet. We walked up to the top of the hill, just keeping an eye on the kid. The top of the hill was 2 to 3 minutes from my house in terms of distance. At last, we felt safe. As we looked back down the hill, the lone kid had put the knife by his leg, now holding it in one hand, but remained in the exact same spot and stared right back at us, expressionless. We told our parents what had happened, and they called a local community enforcement team to scout the area. Apparently, the kid was found with the knife, but we never heard why he was there or what he was doing. 23 years after this all happened, and it is still on my mind. While I was living and studying in the capital of my country, I had a small rented basement of a 1917 built house, next to a nightclub. I was preparing to go to sleep quite early since I had class at 8 a.m. the next day. Right before I fell asleep, I remembered that I forgot to lock the door. But since the city I lived in was generally quite safe, and the only way to get to the entrance of my place was past a front gate, all around to the other side of the house and down some stairs, I didn't think much of it and proceeded to fall asleep. Skip forward to the middle of the night. I wake up and feel someone or something slowly pulling my blanket off of me. In a confused state, I extend my hand and feel a hairy male arm under my fingers. My first thought was, oh, this is probably my drunk flatmate. But then I remembered that he's at his girlfriend's place on the other side of town. In pitch black, I jump from my bed, rush to the light switch, and as I turn it on, I find a stranger. He's around my age, student, standing in his underwear by my bed, with his underwear clearly wet from urine. My initial reaction was to stay calm, since I had no idea if this dude was violent or what was even going on in the first place. I calmly asked him, "Hey man, what the are you doing here?" He was clearly very confused as well and took a sit on a recliner I had in my tiny room. And there we are, both in our underwear, him covered in urine, and I on the border of peeing myself. And what does he do? He extends his hand and introduces himself to me. At that point, I go, "Okay, dude, get out of my house," and start escorting him to the hallway, where I find all of his clothes and shoes on the floor. As I'm escorting him out, he goes into the bathroom and locks himself inside. I hear him turn on the shower and proceed to knock on the door, saying, "Hey, man, if you don't leave right now, I'm gonna call the cops." To which he replies, "I'm not afraid of the police." Well, that's just perfect, isn't it? A few minutes pass and he steps out of the bathroom, butt naked, with my flatmate's towel around his waist. He looks at me looking kind of content and says, "Hey, did you see? They got a shower here." At that point, I'm fuming. "Who's got a shower, a-hole? This is my house. You're a total stranger and you broke into my place." Suddenly, an expression of complete fear appears on his face. "Oh my God. What have I done? Jesus Christ," he starts exclaiming as he is very awkwardly trying to get dressed in the hallway. Then I manage to get him out of the house. I even called one of his friends from my phone to come pick him up at the club. Turns out, he's from a completely other town, and came to party to the capital, got kicked out of the club for starting a fight, and somehow managed to get into my place. To this day, I have no idea what he was on, or how the hell he managed to find my apartment, as it is quite hidden from the street. Anyways, I apologize for the long post. I'm not even sure if this is the right place to post this, but I found it extremely creepy. Let's just say that I never forgot to lock the door from that day. P.S. I didn't sleep well for weeks after. No, and I should add that I actually found the dude on Facebook a while later. Turns out, we have a mutual friend. It happened in my bedroom, at the age of 10. I always had trouble sleeping and spent most nights tossing and turning. I was a horror film fanatic as a child, and being scared was something I didn't have much experience with. I was not afraid of the dark, nor was I easily swayed by strange sounds or odd encounters. I did, however, know when to haul back end out of the situation, or to find a trusted adult. I always slept with my closet doors open, which will come to be some significance later in the story. I should also mention that my family home was in a heavily wooded area, in what some may refer to as the middle of nowhere. One night, around 1 a.m., I awoke to a sound coming from underneath the bed. It sounded like one of my cats was scratching themselves with one of their feet, or doing something to cause a thumping beneath me. I'd heard this same sound many times before, and its source had always been one of my fuzzy friends. So, this time, I didn't look. I closed my eyes and tried to resume my slumber. I turned over onto my left side, which left me facing the wall which my bed was pressed up against. I heard the sound again, thinking that my kitty was directly beneath me. I said goodnight, and I was able to fall asleep once again. The next time I awoke, it was to a surreal and shocking scene. The sheet and comforter of my bed were no longer covering me. I saw a man standing over my bed and poking me. Just poking me with his finger. And the way in which he did so was truly horrifying. It was not the way that a child would poke at a friend in jest. It was as if he was touching another human being for the first time, exploring the sensation of the tip of his index finger jabbing at flesh. What I saw was so unbelievable, so impossibly strange, that I believed I was dreaming. I tried desperately to awake from my nightmare to no avail. The poking continued. He poked at my chest, my belly, my legs, my arms. Paralyzed and scared witless, I yelled, "Wake up!" And with this, the man threw himself to the floor and closed his eyes. It was as if he was trying to lead me to believe that he was asleep or dead. I have no freaking idea. It was at this time that I realized I could not have been dreaming. I somehow found the ability to move, and I jumped from the top of my bed over the man lying on the floor next to me and ran towards my parents' room. When I got to their bedroom door, something came over me. I told myself that it was all impossible, that there was no way a person could have entered our home without breaking in, as we had always kept every door and window locked at night. I'd seen many strange things in my home whilst either falling asleep or waking up. By the third or fourth time, after speaking to my mom or dad about it, I knew that it was my mind playing tricks on me. Plush toys do not have the ability to turn and whisper into each other's ears. Do not ask why, dear reader, as I have no explanation to offer you, but I turned away from my parents' bedroom door and decided to hastily check the house for a break-in. What I found was that nothing was out of the ordinary. No broken windows or locks, no busted doors, nothing. I assured myself that I had to have been dreaming or hallucinating, and blamed my obsession with horror for this. I made my way down the long, dark, and narrow hallway to my bedroom. I peeked inside and saw no one. I turned on the light, got down on the floor just outside the doorway and looked under the bed. Nothing. I proceeded to check both of my windows for signs of a break-in, which were not present. Both windows were closed and locked. I knew it. I was totally seeing things. I crawled back into bed and decided to watch some TV in order to calm myself down and distract from thoughts of the scary as hell dream or hallucination I had just had. I turned on the TV, flipped to a channel with a seemingly boring program, and this always helped me become sleepy, and put the remote control on my bedside table. I was lying on my right side, facing away from the wall that I mentioned previously. As I laid there, my eyes began to adjust to the dark room with the faint light from the TV screen. Just beyond the TV, I saw something that made my heart sink into the pit of my stomach. Inside my closet, with one of the doors now slightly closed, I saw the man standing perfectly still, facing the wall, hiding. Waiting for me to fall asleep, I imagine. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I sat and stared at the man in my closet for what seemed like minutes, but it was likely only a few seconds. I quietly got out of bed, hoping that the man wouldn't notice and that my dad could catch him hiding in the closet. I once again made my way to my parents' bedroom door, still remaining as quiet as I possibly could, and went inside. I shook my dad and my mom at the same time, and when they awoke, I said, "Shh, don't make any sound. There's someone in my closet." My parents both jumped up and said, "What?" I repeated myself and asked them to please call 911. My mom immediately picked up the phone. Neither of my parents doubted my claim, as I had always been honest and forthright. They both knew that there was no way I was making this up, or that I was mistaken. I'm sure that the look I must have had on my face made it clear that this was really happening. My dad told my mom and I that he was going to look, and urged us to stay in their bedroom and lock the door. So, we did. At this point, I was beyond scared. I didn't know what the man was capable of, whether he had a weapon, or whether my dad was safe. I just stood in the room with my mom and cried. After what felt like hours, my dad knocked on the door and told me it was him, and that it was okay to open the door. My mom unlocked the door and let my dad inside. I said something to the effect of, "Did you get him?" And my dad looked at me with the most unsettling and confused look imaginable. He said, "There's no one there." I assured him that there was indeed a man in my room, and that he'd been poking me. My dad said that he had just checked every inch of the house and found no one. He had also checked the doors and windows, just as I had done. Then, it hit me. He must have had a key. As soon as I said this, my parents looked at each other in absolute terror. Our nearest neighbor, a trusted and beloved friend whom we considered family, was in possession of a key to our house, as she had regularly babysat me since I was a toddler. She was the only person outside of my immediate family with the key to our home. Soon after this revelation, the police arrived, took statements, checked around our property, and left. None of us got any sleep that night. The next day, my dad went to the neighbor's house and asked if she knew where her key to our house was. She said yes, and when she went to show him, she saw that it was missing. Her home had no signs of a break-in, and she had always kept her doors and windows locked. My parents had all the locks on our doors changed, and opted to never again give a key to anyone, except in the wake of an emergency. I never discovered the identity of the man that lurked in my bedroom that night. The event left me traumatized, and it took a very long time for me to accept what had happened and moved on. My sleeping trouble turned into full-on insomnia, and for about a decade, I wasn't able to sleep without a light on. It's been 20 years since that night, and apart from my parents, I have never told a soul about it until now. I've actually found writing this to be very cathartic, and I'm glad that I stumbled across Let's Not Meet. My heart goes out to anyone who has suffered a trauma in their lives, and I hope that you are all able to find peace within yourselves. This happened a couple of years ago. I, 26, female, was walking my dog Indy in my local field. It was dark, but it wasn't late. It was wintertime in the UK, so it was maybe 6 p.m. The field is mainly used for rugby/football, but is completely free to walk through whenever. It's also surrounded by houses and streetlights on the road, but the field itself is dark. So I'd brought a torch with me, mainly so I didn't trod into any dog waste. I've come in one entrance of the field and I'm following the path that leads to another entrance. I use the field to make a loop back around onto the road and back to my house, giving my dog some off-lead time whilst in the field. Anyway, as I'm walking up the field, I notice a figure walk in the exit entrance that I was going to use to leave. I keep my eye on this figure as they have very dark clothing on, and their hood up. I'm shining my torch as I'm walking, so I know the person knows that I'm there as it's very obvious. At first, I wasn't nervous, more so just being vigilant. Indy is a wonderful German Shepherd, so, as you can imagine, I feel pretty safe with her. It wasn't until I saw the person duck down behind a bush or tree. There's lots of new trees and bushes planted sporadically up the part of the field that isn't used for sports, that I absolutely froze. I was about 200 feet from the exit, but would have to walk past the bush they hid behind to get to it. I call Indy over and get her back on the lead so she's close by. By this point, she's also hyper alert due to the person behind the bush. With that, I hear a weird, high-pitched voice that sounded like they were saying my dog's name. I assume they heard me call her, and they said it 3 to 4 times in this longed-out, high-pitched voice. It's clearly coming from the person hiding. Luckily, Indy wasn't reacting to it, as it probably barely sounded like her name to her. I had a moment of, shall I fight or flight? It was either I, 1, run past the bush and try for the exit, 2, turn around and run back into the dark field and make for the other exit, a lot further away, or 3, confront this mofo. Indy at this point is hackles up, ears up, and very alert in front of me, while still maintaining a wonderful sense of calm. I went with number 3. I confronted that mofo. I mustered up every bit of courage and confidence I had and shouted at the top of my voice, "What the F are you doing?" The hooded man came out from the bush very quickly without saying anything, and I said the same thing again. "What the F are you doing trying to scare a young woman?" I'm so glad that my voice didn't shake or break when I said it, as I was really terrified at this point. He started to stutter and said, I thought you were someone that I knew." I answered back and said, "Who the F hides from someone they think they know in a dark field?" After that, he apologized a couple of times and continued to skulk down the rest of the field, as I made for a swift exit with Indy. God knows what his intentions were. Maybe he thought I had a smaller dog and was going to try to attack me. Maybe he saw Indy and realized no chance. Or maybe he really did think I was someone he knew. Whatever it was It was weird and scary. So, once upon a time ago, when I had just turned 18, I decided I wanted to try out exotic dancing. All I had to do to get started was get a pair of heels. The only place to get the heels was 2 hours away by car. Me and my friend, who was 17 at the time, drove the 2 hours to get some heels. We went to 5 different stores, and we couldn't find the ones that I wanted, so we decided to stop at Wingstop to get dinner. Then go back to the first store we stopped at and just get the heels they had there. We walked into the Wingstop, and this dude at the front counter started telling us his life story, not leaving anything out, which was a little off-putting. Then he asked where we were from, and we told him the county instead of telling him the exact town. He then proceeded to ask why we were so far from where we live, and my friend answered with, well, she's a stripper, and she's looking for heels. To which I elbowed her in the chest for exposing me. The dude proceeded to give us our food for free, and then called his mom to see if she had any heels. He then asked if we wanted to ride with him. We both said no, but he insisted, and I had just smoked some with my friend before going into Wingstop, so I wasn't thinking. I thought my friend was coming with us, but we pulled out of the parking lot without her, which petrified me. Especially when I realized I left my phone in my friend's car. I sat in that car as far away from him as possible. He pulled into an apartment complex and went inside. He came back out about 30 minutes later with a box of shoes. On our way back, he proceeds to ask me if he could hire me for private dances. He asked what club I was going to work at, and I lied and told him the wrong club. When we got back to my friend's car, he asked for my number. I was going to give him the wrong number, but he said he was going to call it to make sure it was the right number, so I gave him my number. Then he got in the back seat of my friend's car and tried to smoke with us. He had his own, but I wasn't about to smoke someone else's when he was being that sketchy. So I texted my cousin and told him to call me and tell me that my grandma was dying in the hospital. I'm not proud. The dude got out of the car and went back to work, and my friend pulled out of the parking lot, and we parked somewhere else so that we could eat our food. Also, on our way home that night, we almost got into a head-on collision, but we survived. Hello, long-time lurker on Reddit, specifically for this thread. This isn't my main account due to privacy issues. I'll be posting this on this secondary one. I forgot about this instance until recently, and it may not be the creepiest or most suspenseful events to happen, but it definitely sparked concern at the time. Also, sorry if my writing isn't the best, as I am on mobile. This happened almost 15 years ago, when I was 7. My best friend's mom would babysit my brother and I before and after school. My mom would usually drop us off at her house around 6 a.m. She would make us breakfast, and the 3 of us would walk to our elementary, that was less than 10 minutes away. For preface, we would walk through an adjacent neighborhood, through this small wooded area that had an enclosed bridge, and that led us to the back of our elementary school. The elementary sits back in a long tree line that runs about half a mile north and another mile south. Anyways, we're about to get to the turn where we walk into the tree line to the bridge, and this guy comes cruising down the street. At first, I don't even think we noticed him considering how young we were, but right when he's about 10 feet away from us, he slows down to virtually 0 mph. There was nothing that stood out about his appearance either. He was middle-aged, white male, very generic. Well, we all stare at the car and start walking super slowly. If we stop, he would stop. If we walked, he would slowly go. During this whole ordeal, he has a blank expression on his face. Not anger, no smirk, just this sinister deadness, almost. This went on for probably 5 minutes, because we were too scared that he would jump out of the car if we turned our backs on him, and I was mainly scared for my little brother. Finally, he speeds off, and we run the rest of the way to school. Immediately, we go to the principal's office, and at this point, we are bawling. We gave them our version of the story, his description, and whatever else a 7-year-old is actually capable of giving. They take action by calling the cops and our parents. The cops come and we explain where it happened and the story again. Then our parents ended up taking us out of school. From then on, we weren't allowed to walk to school anymore, and our babysitter would just take us. The reason this ended up being so creepy is because, apparently, there had been reports around that time of a guy who would sit under the bridge we walked over right by the school and watch people. They didn't know if he was homeless or if it was this other guy who we encountered. They never caught the guy, and we never saw him again. Whether this was a more sinister encounter than we thought, or he was just bored, well, we will never know. I do know how bizarre it was, though. Who stares at children that intently while driving by? He even turned his head around as he was driving. By his chance of luck, no other cars drove by during this whole situation. But, weirdo driver, let's not ever meet again. And there we have, my friends, a collection of some terrifying stalker, creeper, whatever you want to call it, stories. I go with stalker because, honestly, it works better with the SEO. Creepy encounters, the words don't do well, but it's not relevant. These stories are stories where the scariest thing is the person standing right in front of you. Now, these stories obviously are disturbing, but as I have always said, and will say again right now, they have a sense of edutainment to them. In that, sure, they're creepy and entertaining. However, they can definitely be taken as something to be used for education. To look at these and think, hey, I'm not going to put myself in this situation. Now, obviously, not all of these are situations that could be avoidable, obviously. But if you're ever in a situation where you think you may end up similar to these, do your best to stay out of it. Stay diligent. Keep your eyes open, you know what I'm trying to say. Anyways, very scary stories, and hopefully you all enjoyed them as you do. If you did, please consider hitting that thumbs up button. It helps tremendously. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing, as that also helps. And the other thing you can do is leave me a comment down below letting me know your thoughts, how you're doing. Which of these stories was the most terrifying to you? I haven't answered that question for myself, but because I treat all these stories with respect and equally, I don't wish to state which one I thought was creepiest. You'll just have to guess yourself. You can also do the super thanks, that's what it's called, not super chat, super thanks, which is a tip to the channel, always appreciated, never expected. See, almost flubbed that one. You can also join Patreon or memberships for get early access to content like this, typically up to 24 hours earlier, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. Really depends on how that day went for me, to be honest with you. Yeah. And Patreon, you get access to other stuff too, depending on what you sign up for. All that said, friends, stay safe out there, And remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until I see you again, my lovely friends, much love, and sleep well.